Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. My name is Robert Culligan, and I wanted to present my Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate capstone project to you. I'm doing this because I thought it would be a good thing to put out there. Sharing data findings is an important part of being a data analyst, and I also think that it's really good to get some feedback on my work by really taking the opportunity to put this out to my network on YouTube and LinkedIn. So just to go on about the project a bit, this is the capstone project for the Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate, which is a career qualification. And it really helps us demonstrate some of the skills and techniques that we would have been learning over the last few months. So I'm quite excited to share it with you. The use case that I'll be demonstrating today focuses on a fictional company called Cyclistic. Cyclistic really operates along lines similar to what you would see in a city like London in terms of Lime or Uber electric bikes. So I hope that gives you a good frame of reference when it comes to understanding what kind of data and use case we'll be talking about. If you feel that you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the dataset, please feel free to drop me a comment below or on my LinkedIn. I'll also be linking a copy of my slideshow below, so if you have any specific questions or you'd like to review the appendix, please feel free to do so. Now, the first thing that I'd really like to define is the purpose statement or the goal of the project. This really helps us set appropriate expectations about what we should be working on and what stakeholders want from us, so that we don't turn around in a month or two and produce something that doesn't really fulfill the need of the client at the end of the day. So after reading the project brief, this is what we came up with for a suitable business task. Just to add a bit of additional context, when we say casual riders, we're talking about individuals who use cyclistic services, but instead of buying an annual subscription, they would rather pay for maybe a 24-hour pass or a 48-hour pass. In this case, our primary stakeholder is Cyclistic's head of marketing, but will also be working with the executive committee and the marketing team. Overall, on the data side, I think that this task really demands two things. The first being understanding the user habits of annual subscribers versus casual users, and secondly, understanding the factors that cause casual riders to buy annual subscriptions. In order to help me along with the task, I've been given access to 12 months of data regarding the rides taken place in the Chicago area from casual and subscription members. Ultimately, after some analysis, we came away with three main findings about the nature of the data and Cyclistic by extension. Number one, casual riders and member riders tend to use the service very differently. We tend to see member riding taking short trips, but on a very frequent basis. Secondly, cyclistic riders tend to delineate themselves by what time of week they're willing to use the service. So subscription riders tend to integrate it into their weekday in a way that we don't really see when it comes to casual users who use the service mostly on the weekend. Thirdly, the winter season plays a significant role in the drop-off of casual riders, which goes to almost zero in the January and February months. So now on to the data and what it specifically means for Cyclistic. So in getting to know the data, I thought there were a few things that should be highlighted about the set before we start the analysis. The data provided to us was first party, meaning that it came directly from the Cyclistic company. This is quite important because it would mean that it hasn't changed very many hands and we are essentially getting it straight from the horse's mouth. You can confirm this using the metadata also. A cursory review of the dataset outlines that there are about 6 million entries over the course of the last year, meaning that there's quite a bit of data to review. What it generally contained was a rider unique ID, a start and end time that included the date, start location, end location, and information on whether that specific ride was done by a casual user or a subscription user. Considering the size of the dataset, I was concerned that a platform like Excel or Sheets would not adequately be able to hold the specific data at such scale. As such, my approach was to use a structured query language to actually wrangle the data, and when it came to storage, I decided to use a password encrypted cloud storage system. Once the data was refined and wrangled, I decided to use Google Sheets to analyze and produce the visuals you're seeing. If you'd like more insight on the specific queries that I used with SQL, I've included that in my appendix. And the first bit of data that I'd really like to share about the dataset was that members do account for a majority of the rides over the last year on Cyclistic servers. However, in contrast, you can see that casual riders actually tend to take longer journeys using the service than member riders. Now, what this specific graph describes are the number of rides on average per week, broken down by membership type. And as you can see, members tend to use this service more throughout the week, and it drops off during the weekend, whereas casual members tend to prefer weekend times for cycling. What this generally means for member riders is that they're probably more willing to integrate Cyclistic into everyday work days, such as commuting or going shopping, or etc. Whereas if you are primarily using the service during your downtime, I can assume that you are associating the Cyclistic service more with a leisure activity rather than a everyday transport alternative. Now, this next chart generally describes the demand for rides from members and casual users over the course of the year. And what we can clearly see is a strong bias towards seasonality in the yearly cycle for Cyclistic. And as the winter starts out, we see that casual riders are actually more common than member riders. But as the winter continues, there is a very strong drop-off in the casual market. There's still a drop-off in the member market as well, but it's not as extreme. Now, what we also have here is a breakdown of average ride times for casuals and members over the course of the year. What we can generally see is the difference in average usage across the year between casuals and members. What seems to be the case is that members tend to be more consistent with their cycling habits over the year. The variance is also most pronounced in the months of March, April, and May. Now on to the insights and recommendations. As such, there are three main insights I'd like to communicate at this time. The first one being the habitual differences that exist between casual riders and member riders. As stated before, casual riders are more likely to ride less often but for longer periods of time. Number two, cyclistic customers tend to delineate themselves about when they're willing to use the service. As such, for example, casual riders prefer using the weekend as a time for cyclistic services, whereas members use it all week around. Thirdly, there is a seasonal decline in both casual and member demand, but the winter tends to affect casual ridership disproportionately. Now, finally, as a result of those insights, I have three main recommendations to consider. The first point asks the casual rider to reassess the role that cycling plays in their life and asks them to consider it as more than just a leisure activity, but something that can actively add value to your life. This recommendation is mostly about selling a lifestyle change. The second point is about making an argument around the practicality of Cyclistic's service compared to other transport alternatives. This would essentially help casual users see the potential of integrating Cyclistic into their day-to-day routine in a way that they hadn't seen before, getting them to better mimic the habits of member riders. Thirdly and finally, the last point that I'd like to consider is that of seasonality and getting to understand what exactly is it about the winter that causes casual riders to drop off so significantly. I mean, I think about myself and as a cyclist in London, I think that there are a number of factors that are important to consider, whether it be the quality of the roads, whether it be access to warm clothing, or maybe some sort of behavioural change in drivers. I think all of those questions are important to consider and have implications moving forward. This concludes my analysis of the Cyclistic dataset. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time, and if you have any feedback, please get in contact. And if you want to review any more information, you can find the link to the slideshow below. That has an appendix with more information about my SQL queries and general definitions that I was working with throughout the presentation. So thank you for coming, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.